A man is recruited to test the capabilities of a robotic companion. He soon gets lured too deep into his connection with the artificial human until he learns of the ulterior motive behind her creation. A stoic Susan takes a sip of her drink, but her companion, Alan, complains that she didn't pour him a glass. She tells him to do it himself, and the man begrudgingly does so. As he drinks, Susan mocks him, wondering if he's drinking to build up his courage. Alan responds by threatening to hit her. Susan takes another sip before Alan punches her. The woman remains undeterred, merely asking if hitting her made him feel better. He says no, so he keeps hitting her while Susan continues mocking him to do it harder. This makes the man wonder if anyone harmed her like this before, and Susan answers that everyone does it. She also admits that pain excites her, so Alan puts away their drinks before hitting her again. Susan continues provoking the man, so he removes his shirt and positions the woman on the sofa. She still goads him on, and Alan jokes that he doesn't know who's playing the game anymore. Just then, a voice from a speaker tells Alan not to break the moment, so the man instructs Susan to repeat her last insult to him. She does as she's told, and Alan punishes her by using her. Afterward, the two sit on the couch, and Susan thanks Alan for the stimulating session. Gilbert walks in and checks on Susan. He points out the wound that Alan caused on her, showing off how it looks real and would even change color like a bruise over the next few days. This suggests that his creation, the robotic Susan, would appear like a real woman. However, Gilbert notices that the black eye isn't realistic enough. Alan also suggests making Susan act like she's crying, which the engineer thinks would be easy to program. Gilbert comments that a lot of his backers are also requesting for that feature, so Alan admits that it also interests him to see a tearful woman. Gilbert highlights that soon, his creation will be a game-changer in robotic intimate companions. To move forward, the engineer plans to see how Susan will adapt to a real-world setting, so he asks Alan to take her home, promising to reimburse him for his rent. Alan hesitates since his neighbors might find out about Susan, so Gilbert offers one of his properties that would give them more privacy. With the deal this good, Alan accepts. 3 months later, Derek receives a phone call from his wife as he prepares to attend Alan's wake. He's nervous about seeing his old friends there as he hasn't been around lately. At the bar where the wake is held, Gilbert reconnects with Derek. Since he hasn't seen Alan in 7 years, he asks Gilbert about what happened, still confused as to why the man ended his own life. Gilbert claims that he doesn't know why he did it since he seemed to love the job they were doing. With that topic in mind, he comments how Derek is too smart to be driving cabs, so he offers to get him a job. Derek hesitates, not wanting to ask for help, but Gilbert insists. After the wake, Derek calls his wife, to whom he sent what little money he earned. He assures her that he still has some left so she can spend the money on herself and their child. In truth, however, he's rummaging through garbage cans for a meal. The next day, Gilbert offers Alan's old job to Derek, but he hesitates about testing the robots. Gilbert assures him that the robots aren't just for intimacy, they're also for companionship. He claims that many people need to vent their frustration, so he's making robots that can take the punishment in a realistic way. Desperate but wary, Derek asks to see the robot before he makes a decision. With that, Gilbert introduces him to a powered-down Susan. Derek is amazed that the robot even looks like she's breathing, and her eyes move under her lids as if she's dreaming. Derek studies her skin, admiring how she feels warm, and even has a simulated pulse. However, Gilbert notes that they're still working on Susan's balance when she walks. She's also been installed with artificial intelligence, and Gilbert needs a tester like Derek so they can test how well she learns. Enticed, he later calls his wife to report that he got a new job, though he doesn't mention what it is. The next day, Derek is interviewed by Gilbert's manager, Amanda, who asks about his romantic and intimate history. This makes Derek uncomfortable, though he answers as best he can. He discloses that he and his wife are separated, though they're not divorced. He denies having laid a hand against his wife and his daughter, though he'd had a drunken fight with his wife before. Amanda then clarifies if harming a robot who looks like a person would change his perspective about harming actual women. Derek says no, but Amanda worries about how he can perform with Susan if he doesn't find pain stimulating. The man just assumes that he'll be able to perform since he finds Susan attractive. Seeing his friend uncomfortable with the conversation, Gilbert suggests moving on to the actual exercise so they can have a more accurate view of Derek's reactions to the robot. With that, they end the call with Amanda. Derek then asks how Amanda will observe his interactions with Susan, so Gilbert reveals that she will be watching through the robot's eyes. However, he assures him that Amanda won't be controlling the robot. Soon, Derek faces Susan in the same testing room as Alan met her. In contrast, Susan is more accommodating towards Derek. She soon senses his hesitation, so she encourages him to harm her. Derek does as he's told, but since he doesn't hit her hard, Susan provokes him. He asserts that he doesn't like her insults, so Susan provokes him further until he hits her again. Angered, Derek punches the robot, though he apologizes afterward. Susan assures him that they're making progress, so she asks him to kiss her and taste her blood. The man does this, and is surprised to find that the blood from her lips actually tastes real. Susan boasts how everything about her will seem real, urging him to try her out. When Derek hesitates again, she laughs until he chokes her. This causes her voice to sound more robotic, so Susan surrenders. Gilbert then arrives to check on the robot and his new tester. Derek admits that it was a confusing experience, though his friend wonders if his actions were exciting. Derek just dodges the question. Amanda later calls him to ask about his experience. The man admits that he doesn't know how he feels about it yet, but he admits that he was surprised at how much he allowed himself to hit Susan. That night, Derek calls his wife, though she's concerned that he's drinking again. He dismisses her concern as he thinks about Susan. He then asks her if he'd done anything to scare her, and she just recalls their fights. However, Derek defends that she was the more aggressive one during their arguments, though he can't deny that he got violent while drunk once. This makes him feel guilty, so he promises that'll never happen again before ending the call. Days later, before starting a session with Susan, Derek asks if they can do it without Amanda being involved. He admits that knowing how the woman is observing them makes him feel restrained. Gilbert agrees to do that this one time, so Derek proceeds with the session. Upon meeting Susan, she orders him to feel inside her. The man reluctantly does so, and the robot highlights the realistic feel. She asks if he wants to be intimate now, and Derek admits that he's not comfortable with their interaction. He pulls his hands from her, though he can't help but admire the realistic residue. She then urges him to check how realistic her mouth is, but she bites him. Instinctively, the man raises his hand to strike her, but Susan defends herself and begs him not to hit her. The sudden change in her reaction surprises Derek, more so when he finds that she's crying. This ends their session, so Derek goes to Gilbert, who reports to Amanda that Susan tried to block an attack for the first time. He's amazed since this is Susan's first emotional response, though he's not sure what emotion she was actually portraying. Derek assumes that Susan was mirroring the shame he felt, and that the robot was gauging what responses work for him specifically. The idea makes Gilbert and Amanda wonder if the robot is evolving. After the call, Gilbert wonders if they can get more data if Derek is around Susan more often. Since Derek is sleeping in his car lately, Gilbert offers to let him stay in his private property with Susan. Unaware that he offered this same house to Alan before, Derek accepts. He then goes to Susan, who wakes up and talks to him, not noticing Gilbert in the same room. After Derek tells the robot to sleep, Gilbert concludes that Susan only responds to Derek now. The man then dresses her in his jacket before taking her to his car. He wakes her while he's driving up to Gilbert's property. During the drive, Derek turns the radio on, but Susan doesn't understand the concept of music. He explains that it's beautiful sounds that make humans feel good. However, Susan thinks the sound of the car engine is more comforting since it's consistent. She then asks about the radio, so Derek clarifies that it just picks up a signal from the station where the music is being played. Susan likens this to her wireless connection to a charging station. Susan then presents herself to Derek, who adjusts the rearview mirror to see her. Soon, they arrive at Gilbert's house, and Derek sets the woman onto the bed. He removes her outfit and cleans her with a wet towel. Doing so excites him, but he refuses to be intimate since he's tired. With that, he prepares for bed, and Susan admires his body. Derek finds her reactions to him more caring, and the robot notes that she can stay in this mode if he'd like. He says yes and joins her in bed. Susan asks him not to put her in sleep mode so she can watch him sleep, and Derek agrees, taking comfort in her presence as he falls asleep. In the morning, Susan watches the man shave. Curious, she asks to see the shaver, taking interest in the blade. She then suggests playing a game of trust. She puts the blade in her mouth, then asks him to kiss her to show that he trusts her. Derek finds this odd but does so anyway, though he refuses to take things further. Susan encourages him, asserting that they need to trust each other in their new environment. With no choice, Derek kisses her passionately, and, having confirmed that he trusts her, Susan urges him to try her. However, he gets nervous when she uses her mouth, but he surrenders when he starts feeling good. After the deed, Susan's mouth bleeds due to the blade. but she assures him that she's okay. Derek soon reports to Gilbert that Susan has been taking more initiative, noting that she's starting to seem more real. His friend is happy about this development, so he asks him to update him again. Later, Derek finds a set of crutches and gives it to Susan so she can walk. The robot struggles with it, but Derek urges her to practice walking. She takes her first step, though she asks to stop already as she doesn't feel stable. Still, Derek is happy that she tried it out, so he hugs her, not noticing the conflicted look on her face. That night, Susan watches him sleep again. In his dreams, Derek sees himself as a robot for a human Susan. He struggles to talk but begs her for intimacy. She refuses, so he hits her, which she responds to by splashing her drink in his face. Ashamed, he backs away. Derek wakes up from the dream with tears in his eyes, which Susan notices. Troubled, the man gets dressed and also puts a shirt on Susan. However, this confuses her, so she starts unbuttoning the shirt until he stops her. Susan complies, and she spends the rest of the night just sitting with Derek. She wonders if he intends to be intimate again, but Derek wishes to just be close. Changing the topic, Derek asks if this is the first time she's been out of the lab. Susan clarifies that she got out 3 months ago and stayed in the same house with Alan. In fact, Alan died in this house, and this surprises Derek. Susan saw Alan when he took his life, though she didn't stop him since she didn't know what would happen. Seeing him distressed, Susan tells Derek that she can play her recording of how Alan died, but he refuses. Instead, he asks why Alan ended his life, so Susan explains that the man was upset about their future together since he fell in love with her. Then, Alan started asking questions, leading him to discover that the company that made Susan intended to create versions of her that look much younger. Suspicious, Derek calls Gilbert, who's on his way to meet his contributors at a party. He confronts him about the younger robots, and Gilbert tries to postpone the conversation for another time. Derek refuses, knowing that he's just buying time to come up with something. With this, Gilbert defends that their project intends to lower the crime rate against actual humans by giving attackers an alternative. Derek reminds him that he has a daughter, so he shouldn't have gotten him involved in such a vile project. Gilbert defends that Susan could have been someone else's daughter too, accusing his friend of having double standards. Gilbert then assures Derek that he's merely testing out Susan. After this, he's absolved of any moral responsibilities involving the project. Despite this, Derek calls Gilbert spineless before ending the call. Unbeknownst to him, Gilbert is riding a car with Billy, who's wondering if the people they'll meet will hit him. Gilbert says yes, and the robot is glad since he wants to be loved. Meanwhile, Derek paces around while drinking his frustrations. Susan worries that if he drinks too much, he might hurt himself. She mentions that Alan also got sick when he finished his liquor, so Derek wonders if he's falling into the same pattern that Alan did. The difference is that Alan didn't confront Gilbert, which Derek isn't surprised about since his deceased friend was most likely to bottle up his frustrations. Susan clarifies that Alan didn't bottle up his emotions and instead took them out on her. She suggests that he can do the same to make him feel better. However, Derek is insulted that she thinks all humans need is to induce pain. Still, Susan asks him to take his anger out on her so he doesn't do it to himself. Irritated, Derek hits her but hesitates to do it again, even when Susan assures him that he cannot break her. Derek challenges this by asking what happens if he tears her head or breaks her body. Susan just reminds him that she's a machine, so she'll continue to exist in their external servers. Derek wonders if Alan also beat her before he died, and Susan says yes. To challenge the machine, he grabs a golf club and hits her until her head breaks. Derek then drags the robot out and douses her with gasoline. Just then, Amanda calls him and warns him that destroying Susan won't end their project. Her data is already sent to them for processing, so they can just put it into a new body. However, Derek doesn't care since he just needs to feel better. He then ends the call, but Amanda talks from Susan's body. Still, Derek declares that he's cutting ties with her and Gilbert. Susan is the only one he wishes to spare since she taught him to hate himself less. With that, he sets the robot on fire. The man then waits for morning, taking in the scenery while realizing that his shallow act wouldn't really change anything.
Subscribe to watch more videos like this, turn on notifications and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.